Out of here then.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another Integrative Life Center webinar. This one is going to be awesome and packed with information. We've got Mackenzie Reeser, the nutritionist for Integrative Life Center here. She's done several webinars in the past, and you're in for a great webinar today. Mackenzie, thanks so much for being here today. And I'm going to turn the keys over to you. And while we're doing that, just real quick, another thing, if you have a question for Mackenzie, right underneath our videos here, you'll see a Q&A button. You can push that button and ask questions of Mackenzie. I'll be managing that, watching that, so Mackenzie can present on the topic today. But Mackenzie, thanks again. Excited to learn from you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Corey, and for hosting and emceeing our webinar today. I'm glad to be back with y'all. As Corey said, I've done a few webinars for the Integrative Life Center webinar series. The ones that I've done historically have been, and this is just because of my role at ILC, they've been really focused on nutrition in the context of eating disorders, because that's kind of what I specialize in. And so this one, I thought we would take in a different direction. However, if you're interested in any of that content, it's available on the ILC website. And Corey can provide the link for that, I'm sure, how to see our other webinars in our series. But like I said, today I thought I might take it in a different direction, our content, and really focus on nutrition for mental health, just general mental health. There are, there are tons of essential nutrients. We've got macronutrients and micronutrients, and they're all involved. And so, if you're deficient in any one of them, you're going to be in trouble. But there are some that are really specifically oriented at mental health, or they have a specific role in how your brain works and how, your body and your brain interact. So I wanted to highlight some of those today and talk about what the role of those nutrients is in mental health, how we get those nutrients in our diet, or how you can. Fortunately, for most nutrients, there are lots of different foods that contain them. And so, thinking about practical ways we can incorporate those foods that are nutrient rich into our diets, and understanding really the role that each of those nutrients plays in mental health. So that's the direction I thought we would go today. And I'm glad that y'all have joined us, and hope that this content is interesting to you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and get the presentation rolling for us. All right, here we go. So this, I won't spend a whole lot of time on this first slide, but just to again introduce myself, I'm Mackenzie Reeser. I'm the Director of Nutrition Services at Integrative Life Center. Those letters after my name mean that I have my master's degree in public health. And so really understanding, kind of larger scale programming interventions is something that that's what my training is in. And my MPH was focused in nutrition. So kind of how do we do nutrition interventions on a larger scale? So I love working with the groups of clients at ILC, and, really feel honored to be a part of that. And then the RDN and the LDN are my dietetics licensures. I'm a registered dietitian, and I love it. I wouldn't do anything else. I hope I can always be a dietitian. So again, I'm passionate about nutrition and love working in the context of mental health, nutrition specifically. So all right, let's dive into the content here, which is what y'all came for. All right, so as I said, nutrients that are essential for our bodies are really split into two categories. We've got macronutrients, which are carbs, proteins, and fats, and those are energy providing nutrients. They're macronutrients because they're larger molecules and because we need more of them in our diet. And they provide our bodies with energy. You can't get energy from micronutrients, which are vitamins and minerals and water. So we're going to start looking at micronutrients, and then we'll spend a little bit of time on macronutrients at the end, but really just to highlight a couple that are really essential in mental health specifically. So the key micronutrients we're going to focus on today that relate to mental health are calcium, iron, zinc. All those three are minerals. And then folate, which is vitamin B9, and then vitamin C. That's the direction that we're going here. And we'll go, I think, in that order. This is a side shout out to Tara Young, who's our director of marketing, who took all my information and put it in this lovely presentation. But I'm pretty sure we're going in this order today with what she laid out for us. Okay, so let's start with calcium. So first of all, what's its role in mental health? We've got some pretty important roles here for calcium. So first of all, and this is across your body really, is that calcium acts as a second messenger. So when a hormone or a protein comes to a cell and is, like insulin, for example, as an example of a hormone that might come to a cell delivering a message. Insulin's job is to say glucose or blood sugar is present. Calcium plays a role as a second messenger to get the message that insulin is here to your cell so that your cell will respond to it. So that's why we would call it a second messenger. It's not the first one, it's the second one. And in the brain, that's really important for cellular signaling. So you've got lots of hormones and, again, proteins that are communicating messages to your brain. And calcium has to be there to be a second messenger for a lot of those, specifically your neurotransmitters. So that second bullet point there, that it allows your neurons to release neurotransmitters, that's because calcium's role as a second messenger. So a neurotransmitter being serotonin, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, when those arrive to your neurons, calcium is also present to communicate, hey, that XYZ neurotransmitter is here, and we need to do something about that. Calcium also can reduce premenstrual depressive symptoms. It's not something that, I would say 100% all the time is going to work, but it's something that is worth trying, calcium supplementation. And throughout this, I'm not going to give, guidance on specific numbers of micrograms or milligrams or anything like that, because you really need to, if you had questions about this specific to you or a patient or client you're working with, that really needs to be assessed on an individualized basis. But just to say generally, calcium supplementation can reduce premenstrual depressive symptoms. Calcium is also a mineral that has some sedative and calming effects, which can be helpful for sleep or folks who have, issues with just overstimulation. So your folks with ADHD or anxiety, integrating calcium into the diet can be promoting of overall the kind of a sense of calm and relaxation, and can promote sleep. So that's kind of generally what calcium is doing. And let's talk about where to find calcium in our diets. So calcium is pretty well known for being found in dairy products like milk, yogurt, kefir, cottage cheese, all great sources, really rich sources of calcium, and your body absorbs them really well. And for each of these dietary, what you're seeing right now is kind of the format that we're going to follow throughout this process. I'll tell you what the nutrient's role is, and then where we find it in diet, and also some factors that affect absorption of that nutrient. So dairy products get a really good rap for being a good provider of calcium, in part because they're easy to absorb. So for example, you can see on the right side, that right side bullet under absorption, fiber, phytic acid, and oxalic acid reduce absorption of calcium. Those are nutrients that are found in plant foods. Milk, yogurt, kefir, cottage cheese, all those dairy products are not gonna, in isolation, they're not gonna have those competitive nutrients that prevent calcium from being absorbed because they bind to calcium. So that's why dairy products tend to be the most easily absorbable sources of calcium. You can also find calcium in tofu. It has to be processed with calcium though. It's not like you kind of have to look at the ingredients label to see, was this tofu processed with calcium or not? It doesn't occur just naturally. Like tofu is made from soybeans. Calcium is not highly found in soybeans, so it's added as part of the processing process. We also find calcium in fish where you eat the bones. So again, it's not highly present in the fish themselves, but when you eat the bones of the fish, because we all know where we store calcium, and it's in our bones, and fish do the same. So if you're consuming fish where you eat the bones, like sardines or anchovies or sometimes salmon, especially when it's canned, the bones are included in that processing process. I'm going to try not to say that anymore. So that's another good source of calcium. We fortify calcium because some people can't tolerate dairy products or don't want to tolerate dairy products in their diet. Some people don't have ready access to fish, or again, don't like fish. But a lot of people drink juices. So calcium is often fortified in juice. You may see it in orange juice, for example. It's pretty commonly found in there. And then cooked greens. And I say cooked greens because when I lead nutrition groups for our clients, sometimes they'll say, I'll ask, what are good sources of calcium? And they'll say spinach. And that is true. And that goes for other leafy green vegetables. But again, you go over here to the absorption factors, and spinach and leafy greens tend to have lots of these phytic acid, oxalic acid components to them, and some fiber as well. And those compete with calcium being absorbed. So when you cook those greens, it reduces the content of phytic acid and oxalic acid, and therefore enhances your body's ability to absorb calcium. The other couple of factors that go along with calcium being able, our bodies being able to absorb it well, are when we're not getting enough vitamin D, we're not great at absorbing, or it's less about absorbing calcium and more about pulling it into our bones, which is where we want it to be. So inadequate vitamin D intake will reduce our body's ability to get calcium to where it needs to go. Also, alcohol competes with absorption of calcium. You're going to see that as kind of a trend. So those are some factors to keep in mind when you're thinking about how to get calcium in your diet. So some ideas for getting calcium in foods are going to be to include, foods like kefir, yogurt, cottage cheese with low fiber fruit options. And some of those, because sometimes we like to top those foods with fruit. So, or if you're putting milk in a smoothie or yogurt, for example, choosing lower fiber fruits as your add-ins, because you're not cooking those fruits. You don't really have a chance to degrade some of the fiber in there. So you want to choose lower fiber fruit options. And those are going to be like peaches, nectarines, melon. Those don't have a whole lot of fiber in them. So adding those in is going to allow you to absorb as much calcium as possible. You could do like a tofu stir fry with vegetables. And if you throw an egg in there, you get some vitamin D. There are not a whole lot of great sources of vitamin D out there, and eggs are one of them. So throw some egg in there with your stir fry. And the stir frying process will also at least partially cook some of your vegetables, reducing the phytic acid and oxalic acid. And then if you wanted to even go farther than that, then you can include with your stir fry some white rice or some sprouted brown rice. And the sprouting process for grains, same thing that I'm a repeat record here, reduces the phytic acid and oxalic acid content in those grains. So those are some suggestions for ways that you can get easily absorbable calcium into your diet. And as I mentioned before, also just consuming any of those dairy products just on their own, you're going to get lots of calcium from that. All right, let's go on to our next nutrient, which is iron. And it looks like Tara included some sprouted beans in our picture here. You can see their little sprouts in there, which is great. So first of all, what's the role of iron in mental health? So iron helps within our brain. Iron helps to make ATP, and this is a throwback to high school chemistry, but ATP is the energy source that's like the baseline energy that our cells create, ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And iron is part of the process of making that within our neurons. Iron also helps to make serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine, and dopamine, all four of those key neurotransmitters. Iron is a part of the process of creating them. And the way we create those in general is converting amino acids, proteins, into those neurotransmitters in our brain. You've got to have iron to do that. Not only does iron help to make those neurotransmitters in the first place, but it also increases the action of serotonin and dopamine specifically in our brains. And then finally, and I think this will come up again with some of our other nutrients, iron helps oxygen to bind to our red blood cells, which is important for keeping all of the cells in our body oxygenated. But you know, our brain really needs a lot of oxygen. It's doing a lot of metabolic work up there. And so, you know, even if you're just sitting around relaxing, your brain needs a lot of oxygen. So iron helps your red blood cells bind oxygen and carry that oxygen throughout your body, specifically to your brain. So those are some ways that iron can be helpful for mental health and really plays a key role. And we know that, just, I don't want to make an assumption. Serotonin's role is to produce a sense of calm and relaxation. Dopamine is the neurotransmitter that's associated with sensations of pleasure. So that those are what iron is helping really to enhance the action of. Okay, so dietary iron, where do we get this in food and what are some factors affecting absorption of iron? So lean meats and some seafood, especially oysters. We can see that lovely oyster over there. You're lucky if I'm here in Nashville, we're landlocked. So I'm jealous if you live somewhere where you can get really lovely fresh oysters, but I'll stick with the lean meats around here. So we've got, lean meats, seafood, especially oysters. Those are really your best sources. That's heme iron, which is ready to go. Your body doesn't need to do a lot of conversion to get heme iron to a place that it's ready to, you know, help with the oxygen binding and the other jobs that iron has to do. Plant-based iron, your body just has to do a little bit more work to get it to the point that you can really use it. And so if you are a person who doesn't consume animal products like lean meats or oysters, you're going to need to focus on getting more food sources of iron that are plant-based compared to folks who include meat in their diet. It's not right or wrong to include meat or not, just saying you got to get more of your plant-based sources if that's where you're going for iron. But the other four on the list are all plant-based sources. So beans, white beans are of all the beans, white beans have the most iron. And lentils, also a good source. Chocolate has lots of iron. The darker, the better, because it's been less processed, so more of the iron is retained. And then spinach and tofu. Those are all sources of iron. You can see on the absorption side over here, phytate, which is the salt form of phytic acid, that is going to decrease the absorption of dietary iron. So for your spinach, for your tofu, for your spinach and for your beans, we want to cook those. I don't know anyone who's eating raw beans, but just in case you were thinking about it, you're not going to get great iron from that source. And spinach you're going to get more iron when it's cooked, just like with your calcium. A couple of other really specific to iron absorptive factors. So levodopa and levothyroxine are medications that some clients with mental health challenges may be prescribed. Levothyroxine, not necessarily for mental health, that's for thyroid issues. But those two medications can have adverse interactions with excessive iron intake. So you want to be really careful with iron supplementation with those medications. And then we've got proton pump inhibitors. So those are medications that are prescribed for people who struggle with acid reflux. And proton pump inhibitors reduce the amount of acid that is present in your stomach. When you eat iron, you need acid in your stomach to convert iron to a usable, absorbable form of iron. And so if your acid production is reduced in your stomach, then it's going to affect the amount of iron that is converted to a usable form. Phytate and polyphenols, again, those are components found in plant foods. Cooking reduces those, but when they're present in foods as is, they're going to reduce your absorption of iron, as will tannins and calcium. So those are some reducing factors. Ascorbic acid is vitamin C. Vitamin C really enhances our body's ability to absorb iron. And meat products have other components within them that help us to absorb iron. So what does this mean for how we might want to consume foods with iron? So my suggestions would be a couple things, including like a white bean hummus with carrots. And I throw carrots in there as your vegetable of choice because they're pretty low in fiber, low in phytic acid. And so they are not going to really have a lot of competition. And then white beans are really rich in iron. Or if you're more of a meat eater, you could do a steak salad. Just don't include cheese on it because we've got calcium here that helps to block the absorption of iron. So we wouldn't want to include a calcium source on that steak salad. But you've got lots of other, and the salad components are going to have lots of vitamin C, which we're going to cover here in a few minutes. So those are a couple of examples of ways that you might incorporate dietary iron in ways that are going to work well with your absorption. All right, let's move on to our next nutrient, which is zinc. These cashews are looking really delicious to me right now. Okay, so what's zinc's role in mental health? So first of all, it works in our neurons and glial cells, which are other types of cells in our brain. There are some specific regions of the brain, and specifically the hippocampus, which is important for memory, that are rich in zinc. So without zinc present, impacts on memory function, just cognitive processing in general. Zinc also helps to make hemoglobin, which if we go back to iron, when I said iron helps oxygen bind to our red blood cells, that's through hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is the protein that binds onto our red blood cells and helps carry oxygen around our blood, and zinc helps to make hemoglobin. So it also has a role in supporting the oxygenation of our brain. Low zinc tends to be associated with depressive symptoms. Does that mean that low zinc is causing depression? No, not necessarily. Association is not always causation. But low zinc, we can't ignore the fact that low zinc is associated with depressive symptoms. So supplementing zinc is often done in the context of mental health treatment. Okay, so where do we find zinc in our diets? Here are oysters again. So another reason for me to be jealous of y'all with the oysters. And crab too. Those are great sources of zinc. Meats in general, beef, pork, dark meat, chicken, and turkey especially, are rich in dietary zinc. Dairy, dairy foods, and I gave you the list of those earlier. And then again, for y'all who don't choose to eat meat, cashews, beans, and chickpeas are really rich in dietary zinc. A couple of factors affecting absorption are going to be, once again, we find that phytic acid, especially corn. For some reason, the phytic acid in corn, and and this, just admitting that I don't know details past this on the corn. I just know that corn tends to really compete with dietary zinc absorption. Not only does it have a lot of phytic acid, there may be some other factors in corn that affect that. And then supplementing with iron also causes our body to not absorb zinc well. And that's because they use some of the same transport portals in our intestinal system to leave our intestines and enter our bloodstream. So if you've got a lot of iron present, and that iron is going through those iron zinc portals, then you're not going to be able to get as much zinc through into your bloodstream. So usually it's encouraged to supplement, if you're going to do supplementary iron, that you do that between meals. So that's one way to reduce, like don't stop taking your iron if you have a good reason to take it, but taking it between meals can foster less competition for absorption. So you could do, how do you get, meal ideas for zinc? You could do something like pork and beans, the, classic. You don't necessarily have to get your pork and beans from the can, but you can make your own. And even from the can, you're going to get that dietary zinc. So do what you can. And then yogurt with cashew butter. If you want to do yogurt in a smoothie, you can add whatever kind of nut butter you want, but cashew butter specifically is going to get you lots of dietary zinc in there. And as we talked about before, dairy foods themselves have lots of zinc, and they don't have those phytic acid and oxalic acid components that can compete with mineral absorption. So throw some cashew butter in your yogurt if that's not something you've done before. Okay, now give me 1 second. I always leave these webinars feeling dehydrated. I have to focus on my hydration while we're doing them. Okay, so we've got a couple more nutrients to go through. We're moving from our minerals into our vitamins. So folate is the first, vitamin we're gonna hit. And folate, vitamin B9, you're probably going to hear it folate more often than you're going to hear vitamin B9, but I do want you to know that it's one of our B vitamins. Has a few important mental health roles. So first of all, specifically, it's part of the conversion of tryptophan, the amino acid, to serotonin in your brain. And it also helps to convert tyrosine into norepinephrine. So tyrosine, the amino acid that is the precursor to norepinephrine. You got to have B9 around to do that. Folate also has a role in building new DNA and red blood cells. So when you are, hold on, let me think about how I want to say this. So cellular replication happens all the time. Even if, we think about like building new cells when you think about like healing a wound or someone who's growing like a kid, but we're all always building new cells. You're building new intestinal wall cells, the new, sloughing off the lining of your stomach all the time. So we're always building new cells, needing new DNA. So you've got to have a lot of folate around to be able to do that. And then building red blood cells also requires folate. So there we go back to that oxygenation. Red blood cells have a job to carry oxygen around our body. If we don't have enough red blood cells, we're not getting enough oxygen to those tissues that really critically need it. Folate may also enhance the effectiveness of some antidepressants. Specifically, it's been shown to enhance the efficacy of fluoxetine. Especially when it's combined with vitamin B12. So I want to be clear, I'm not providing like a specific dosage recommendation on this. I'm not, this needs to be assessed on an individual basis, whether this supplementation is appropriate, but want to put it out there. It may be a question to ask your provider or encourage your client to ask their provider or their dietitian if they're lucky enough to have one on their team. About supplementation with those nutrients if they're taking an antidepressant. So dietary folate, where do we get it? Beef liver. I tend to have people kind of cringe when I say beef liver, but if you're one of those who likes it, it is pretty nutrient rich. So that would be one option. If you are not a beef liver fan, you can get your dietary folate from green vegetables. And the ones that I've listed there are the highest in folate of the green vegetables: spinach, asparagus, Brussels sprouts, avocado, broccoli, and peas. Flours like white flour even, or wheat flour, are often enriched with folate. And that's because, and this is not a mental health function so much, but folate plays a role in neural tube development during the fetal period. And so this is a public health intervention, back in the day where the government said, okay, we're having a lot of kids born with neural tube defects, in part because, pregnant women are not getting enough folate in their diet. And so there became this federal mandate to enrich flour, which a lot of people eat, with folate. So you can find it in enriched flours. It's also naturally found in black-eyed peas and kidney beans. So there are a number of factors that affect the absorption of folate from our digestive tract to our bloodstream. Beans, bananas, and orange juice, which beans is it's a little kind of backwards because I just told you that kidney beans have lots of folate in them, but they have some other components in them that compete with the absorption of folate. Folate is just generally unstable naturally in foods. It's more stable as a supplement. So we're more likely to actually be able to get it from food to a usable form to absorption when we take in folate as a supplement, which is again why it's included in a lot of prenatal supplements, because you may not, you can eat all the spinach you want and you may still not be getting enough absorbable folate. So folate and folic acid are the same thing. They're both vitamin B9. They're both doing the same thing, but folic acid is created synthetically and it is a lot more stable than dietary folate is. Here we go again. Excessive alcohol intake can reduce our body's ability to absorb folate, which is one reason that I tend to see folks with alcohol coming into ILC who have struggled with alcohol use. Their red blood cells may be low. Y'all give me just 1 second. Red blood cells may be low, hemoglobin may be low, hematocrit may be low, all those kind of iron markers, because they don't have enough folate getting into their bloodstream to be able to absorb or to be able to kind of reach their needs. So excessive alcohol, again, really, these are putting in a plug here. If you're working with folks who struggle with substance abuse, it's important to have someone who understands nutrition on your team and can help to provide guidance around, if any supplementation needs to take place, or if this person has, factors that are going to affect their body's ability to absorb some of these nutrients. And that can be, play a role in someone's motivation to make changes to their behaviors if they know, oh, I'm not getting enough of these nutrients because of my substance use. Here are all the ways that that's going to affect me. So it can kind of build the case for reducing excessive use of substances. And then any malabsorptive disorders like IBS and celiac disease, because again, those are just generally problematic for absorption of nutrients, just period. But those can affect dietary folate absorption. There's a genetic mutation, the MTHFR genetic mutation it's not actually about absorption of folate. It's really about, once you absorb folate, you have to do a couple of conversions to get it to a usable form. And the MTHFR gene produces the MTHFR protein, and that protein is required to convert folate to a usable form, the final methylation reaction there. So if you can't make that protein, then you can't get folate, you can get very much folate into a usable form. So again, that's something to test for. Boiling foods enhances the folate activity in them. So again, these green vegetables, boil them. Don't do it for ages, but blanch them even to get a little bit more folate activity out of them. Some food ideas for your folate-rich foods. Avocado toast made with bread that has been created with enriched flours. And pasta, same way. Pasta is often made with flour that's been enriched with folate. Throw some Brussels sprouts, spinach, peas in there. Cook them quickly so that you get some of the enhancement of the folate action. And there you go. You've got a really folate-rich meal. So those are a couple of ideas for you to get your dietary folate in. Throw avocados in everything. Okay. All right, let's go on to our next nutrient, Here we go. Vitamin C. This is the last micronutrient we're going to hit. And then we're going to, like I said, spend a few minutes on macronutrients. So vitamin C, really highly concentrated in the brain. And vitamin C's job is to be an antioxidant. It has a few different jobs, but one really important one is its role as an antioxidant. Antioxidants scavenge free radicals, protecting the brain from oxidative stress. Like I said before, there's a lot of metabolic activity happening in your brain. And that's just part of the deal. You can't reduce the amount of, I mean, unless you're like, not eating, but don't do that. So you can't reduce the metabolic activity that happens in your brain. It's going to happen. But that's why vitamin C is so highly concentrated there, is because you're going to have a lot of oxidative stress that can occur. So vitamin C is present to reduce those effects some. Vitamin C also differentiates neurons and helps them to mature. So as especially for folks who are in a phase of life where they are building a lot of new neurons, and those neurons are maturing, vitamin C plays a role. So especially in young people. Vitamin C helps to form the myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is the fatty coating around many of your neurons that speeds up the processing of information from one neuron to the next. So not all neurons have a myelin sheath, and that's the way it's supposed to be. But when you're building that myelin sheath for the neurons that do require it, you need vitamin C to do that. And myelin is a fat also, just it's a fatty substance. So there's a role for fats to play. We need vitamin C to produce serotonin, epinephrine, a couple of neurotransmitters that we've mentioned before. As you're seeing, there are a lot of nutrients required to make some of these neurotransmitters. They don't just show up on their own, active and ready to go. We have to have some of these vitamins and minerals around to produce them. And then the last couple I'll mention are that vitamin C is essential for collagen formation. Collagen, I think most people tend to think of collagen as, being part of what makes your skin supple and no wrinkles, but it also lives in your blood vessels. It's in a lot of places in your body, your joints, and your blood vessels, for example. So we have to have vitamin C to be able to make collagen. You can take all of the collagen supplements you want. Y'all, this is like a pet peeve in the supplement world these days, is that collagen supplements are they're so in vogue, but your body just takes that collagen, breaks it down into its individual amino acids, and takes those amino acids and does whatever it wants to it. It's not like eating collagen supplements is going to make your skin look better. Your body does whatever it wants with those amino acids. But something you can do to produce more collagen is to make sure that you're getting those component amino acids and vitamin C in your diet, because then you at least have the building blocks if your body so chooses to use them to make collagen. But when it comes to mental health, we want to make sure that our blood vessels have really good integrity, and the collagen in them is part of that, making sure that blood is flowing well through our body, nutrients are getting to where they need to go, and oxygen on our red blood cells. And then we already covered that vitamin C boosts iron absorption. So another bonus for vitamin C. Okay, so how do we get vitamin C? This one's pretty easy, actually. So this applies, I probably should have mentioned this with iron as well, but we've got dietary vitamin C coming from fresh fruits and vegetables. Those are the best sources of them. And what I should have mentioned with iron that also applies to vitamin C when it comes to absorption is that the more you get of these nutrients, like vitamin C and iron, the less you're going to absorb them, because your body realizes there's enough of this around. So like for iron, when you're getting more in your diet than you really need, you're not going to absorb as much of it to start with, but B, your body upregulates these proteins called ferritin, which are essentially like iron locks. Ferritin lives inside of many of your cells and sequesters iron away when there's more than enough in your body, and it stores it there to release it. Iron can be toxic if you get too much of it. So your body has this mechanism for saying there's plenty here, we don't need more, let's lock it away. With vitamin C, that's mostly affected at the level of absorption. So when you're getting lots of vitamin C, you're not going to absorb as much of it. You're just going to pee it out, y'all. Just you can supplement vitamin C all day, every day. You're going to have just some expensive urine. So no need to over supplement some of these things. And when your body is low in vitamin C, or you're not getting very much in your diet, your body will enhance its absorption of vitamin C. And the main factor here with vitamin C is that cooking, I just kind of put all these under the absorption category. This one is another that it's not actually about absorption. It's that cooking foods, exposing them to heat and light, and heat and light are mostly the factors. It's gonna degrade them before you even get a chance to absorb the vitamin C. So eating fresh, raw fruits and vegetables like citrus, papaya, strawberries, those are great fruit sources of vitamin C. And then bell peppers, tomatoes, potatoes are great vegetable sources of vitamin C. So eating those raw as possible. You're probably not going to eat raw potatoes, but even cooking them, they're still going to retain. You're going to lose some of the vitamin C, but you're going to there will still be some around. So that is the what foods should you eat to get vitamin C? How should you incorporate them in your diet? Fresh fruits and vegetables. That's really where we leave it, because that's really all there is to it. All right. So moving briefly into the role of macronutrients, carbs, proteins, fats. Proteins, and again, as I said, the main role of these macronutrients is that they're a source of energy for your body, calories. You got to have them to live. You got to have energy for your cells to function. But when it comes to mental health specifically, proteins are made of chains of amino acids, which are converted to neurotransmitters. And they have lots of other jobs, but your neurotransmitters specifically are not going to exist if you're not getting protein in your diet. Then fats. Fats are a significant component of your brain tissue. If you sucked all the water out of your brain, which I would not recommend, but if you ever were to, 70% of what is left is polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's omega-3s are an example of polyunsaturated fatty acids. They are highly present in your brain tissue. And that's another reason that we need antioxidants up there, like vitamin C, because fats are prone to oxidation. Think about leaving, butter out on your counter for a week. It's going to get rancid. Don't do that. So it's, we want antioxidants to be present in our brain to protect that really fat-rich environment. Omega-3 fatty acids, you may have heard that they're good for mental health or important for mental health. One of the reasons for that is that they support cognitive flexibility. Polyunsaturated fatty acids, saturated fatty acids are shaped like a comb, and the three prongs of the comb are really rigid. There's a role for those rigid fats. We don't want everything in our body where fats are to just be all loosey-goosey. You need some saturated fats in there. But you also, especially in your brain, want flexible fats so that you can build cognitive flexibility. So again, this is important for our clients with mental health and for us with our own mental health to include polyunsaturated fatty acids like omega-3s in our diet to support cognitive flexibility. We really want to make sure that we've got omega-3s present for that. And then the third macronutrient to touch on is carbohydrates. One of the important roles there is that carbs unlock the blood-brain barrier to allow proteins into your brain where they are then converted to neurotransmitters. Some of them are small enough, some proteins are small enough to cross without help, but for those larger proteins, you got to have carbs to say, all right, let's let the flow of energy in and And that's one of the roles of carbs there. And then blood glucose is also associated with mood fluctuations, whether your blood sugar gets, too high, like a spike when you eat something that is full of really easily digestible sugars. That spike can cause irritability, and then so can the drop afterwards. So staying well nourished throughout the day is really important when it comes to mental health, and making sure that you're getting good carb sources in your diet consistently. There's also fiber, which is what we're going to spend the last part of our conversation talking about. And fiber is a carb. So you can't go low carb and high fiber. It's not possible. So got to pick one. And I would encourage you to include fiber in your diet. And here is why. So fiber, complex carbohydrate. That means that it's going to take a while to digest. It's not going to be a source of quick energy. And that's one of the reasons that when we're hungry, we don't crave artichokes. We don't crave these, or typically, maybe spinach artichoke dip. I don't know about y'all, but that sounds great to me. But we're not going to crave, whole grain cereal when we're really hungry. We're more likely to crave a sugary food or a high fat food because we want something that is really nutrient rich and is going to get digested like that. Fiber is not quickly digestible. And in fact, our body doesn't even have all of the enzymes that it needs to fully digest fiber. So that's where our digestive bacteria comes in. Our microbiome is the term that is in vogue that you may have heard, but it's just the bacteria that live in your digestive tract. And those digestive bacteria can do the job that our body doesn't produce enzymes to complete all the time, and allows us to break down fiber fully. So in response to breaking down those fiber molecules, those bacteria will produce short chain fatty acids and serotonin. Short chain fatty acids are essentially, isn't it kind of weird? Your body makes fats from carbs. But those short chain fatty acids, when fiber gets down into your lower digestive tract, the short chain fatty acids that bacteria produce when they digest fiber nourish the lining of your intestinal walls. So it creates a stronger, less permeable, more healthy digestive tract lining. And then we know what serotonin does in the brain, at least. Well, guess what? Your brain has nerves that go down into your gut. So when bacteria produce serotonin in your gut, those nerve endings that innervate your intestinal lining sense that serotonin is present and send a message back up to your brain that, hey, serotonin is here, producing that feeling of calm and relaxation. So fiber, in combination with a healthy, complex world of bacteria in your digestive system, are going to contribute to really positive mental health. Just positive mental health in general. So dietary fiber, where is it? We get dietary fiber from whole grains like bran cereal, shredded wheat, whole wheat pasta, barley, quinoa, oats. They're all great sources of dietary fiber from grains. Fruits, especially berries like raspberries, blueberries, blackberries, you're eating the seeds. The seeds are where the fiber is. And then prunes and pears, also good sources. Vegetables, artichokes, potatoes with the skin, pumpkin, broccoli, and greens, all great sources of fiber. And then legumes like beans, peas, split peas, and lentils, and some seeds like chia and flax, especially. Those are your good dietary fiber sources. So a couple food ideas here would be to have, and one that's pictured here actually, to have a fiber-rich cereal with berries and nuts thrown in there. You could also do something like a potato and lentil curry. So you've got, you do potatoes and lentils in any way you want. Curry just sounded good to me as I was coming up with these ideas. So do whatever potato lentil combination you want to do, but putting those two together is going to get you really lots of fiber. Or doing something like a berry smoothie with chia seeds, throw those in there. So those are just to get your creative juices flowing with how you might get more dietary fiber in. Those are some ideas, but you combine any of these foods. I don't include a lot of notes on absorption here because really your digestive bacteria is going to do the job here. You're not absorbing dietary fiber. We don't break it down very well. So we don't that's not really the point of your fiber. It's about the way that it's interacting with your gut bacteria. So those are the notes on that. So this is just some final take home points here. What do we pull from here? So there are lots of nutrients that contribute to mental health. I've listed just a few of them for you. As I said, being deficient in any essential nutrient is going to have negative repercussions, but we want to just, I really wanted to provide you with a few to really focus on today. Single nutrient, and I feel like I kind of have to caveat this whole presentation with the note that single nutrients are really not the whole story. There's no perfect, you can't like perfect your absorption of nutrients. I want you to know about a couple of factors that may play a role, but I also don't want you to lose sleep over this. And your clients don't need to lose sleep over it either. If there are major factors that, that you or the other health professionals that you're working with can see that are, real, like excessive alcohol intake, for example, stuff like that. If that's going on, then let's help our clients to take action on that. But overall, single nutrients are not the whole story here. We want to get an overall well-balanced diet. If you eat something with phytic acid in it, you're going to be fine. Your body is going to make up a lot for our, for the ways that we eat that maybe don't foster absorption in all the best ways. The best thing that you can do for your mental health, besides focusing on some of the foods that we've talked about today, but is really to practice moderation and variety. Getting a wide variety of many different nutrients in your diet, cooking them in different ways. Back to, we get more folate when we boil our vegetables, but we're going to lose some vitamin C. So mix it up, get multiple types of nutrients in your diet. Those are really the key take home points here. And so it's been my pleasure to share with you today, and I'm happy to take questions if we've got any.
Dude, thank you so much, Mackenzie. I'm trying to look through the questions real quick, and been a fantastic presentation. Okay, I want to give the disclaimer before I ask you, but to everybody else, Mackenzie is not your nutritionist. She's sharing, her experiences and expertise, but you need to consult your doctor, nutritionist, dietitian, all that. So when I ask these questions, I want to give that disclaimer for you, Mackenzie.
Yeah, of course. Thanks.
Okay, so Karen asks, are garbanzo beans quote white beans?
No, that one, I would, my caveat here is that I was kind of nervous to get some of these questions because as a dietitian, I know a lot about food, but there are so many intricacies when it comes to food and how it's absorbed and how it works in the body. I was like, oh, they're going to ask me so many questions I'm going to have to say I don't know the answer to. That one I know though. Garbanzo beans are not white beans. When we talk about white beans, we're talking about like Great Northern beans or cannellini beans or navy beans. Those are your white beans. Garbanzos are AKA chickpeas. They're a little bit different, and you can tell by the shape and the texture if you've eaten both of those different types of white beans. You're right, the color is similar, but the shape and the texture are pretty different.
Thank you. Teresa says, can you speak more to the interaction of certain food categories, like don't put cheese on the steak salad? And then, yeah, let me ask you that one first, and then I'll ask my follow-up.
Yeah, sure. So the reason that I had mentioned, let me pull up my paper notes here so I remember which slide that one was on. But yeah, the intricacies here of what foods to eat together or what foods to avoid together are really about absorptive factors. How are we going to be best able to absorb some of these specific nutrients. So like, not putting cheese on a salad is not about cheese being something that you should avoid all the time. It's just that when you want to eat something like steak, which has a lot of iron in it, calcium is going to compete for absorption with iron. And so if you put cheese alongside a steak, which has lots of iron and the cheese has lots of calcium, then you're just not going to be able, your body's going to not absorb as much of that iron as it would normally. So it's, again, that's not something to lose sleep on or sleep over. I just want you to kind of know what some of the factors are that affect absorption. Were there other ones in that list, Corey?
The follow-up was, is black tea, what are your thoughts about black tea for overall brain and health?
Yeah, black tea. So yeah, different colors of teas have kind of different impacts. So black tea doesn't have a whole lot of antioxidants in it. Green tea, on the other hand, really does. Both black and green tea are sources of caffeine. So if you're someone, or if, again, you're working with clients and your client is someone who is really doesn't respond well to caffeine, it kind of enhances their anxiety symptoms or ADHD symptoms, for example, then black or green or any sort of caffeinated teas or other beverages are probably not going to be the best bet. And when it comes to teas in general, across for mental health, I usually would recommend a green tea because of the richer profile of antioxidants. And we talked a little bit about the role of antioxidants in the brain. So that's again, nothing wrong with black tea, but when it comes to mental health, I'm more likely to recommend a green unless someone's really caffeine sensitive.
Yvonne is on a mostly gluten-free diet. What are your thoughts about gluten-free and then the nutrients you need for all of this related to
Yeah.
gluten-free type diets?
Yeah. Um, so for people with, I mean, let me think about how to respond to that one. So people with celiac disease need to be on a gluten-free diet. That's the only situation where gluten is a non-negotiable. Like, you can't have it. There are also situations where people don't tolerate gluten super well. They may have like inflammatory effects that show up in rashes or headaches, for example, when they consume foods with gluten. That especially, I see that especially occurring, and I want to be clear that this is mostly anecdotal from my work with clients. I don't have a lot of like research studies I can point to on this. This is my anecdotal experience, is that clients who have been going through a lot of stress, whether, I work with lots of folks who are recovering from trauma, people who are, recovering from substance abuse. Those are stressful, like they put a lot of stress on your body. That can just negatively affect your body's ability to absorb things, period. So sometimes people will have more symptoms of gluten intolerance when they have been experiencing those chronic stress symptoms. And in that case, what I usually recommend is to abstain from gluten at least until the body has healed and the client or the person that I'm working with has better stress management practices and can really reduce the effects of stress hormones flooding their body all the time. So it's really getting to the root cause of why is this person not able to tolerate gluten very well in the first place. And let's address that so that you can include foods in your diet that are getting you more variety. So all that to say, I don't see gluten causing mental health problems. I don't tend to recommend a gluten-free diet unless, again, someone has clear need to do that. And then if I'm not getting to that person's full question, you're welcome to put another question in the Q&A, but that's kind of what I'd share with it for now.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, we've booked up our hour here. This has been an excellent presentation, Mackenzie. I know we're going to want to have you back as often as your schedule allows. You're very busy with your work, I know, at Integrative Life Center. But there's several questions here, but what I'm going to do is I'll give those to Mackenzie, and then we're going to try to book another webinar very soon to get Mackenzie on and talk about these subjects because they're vitally important. But thank you, Mackenzie, for sharing today. And
Mhm.
thank you everybody else for being here today and the great questions. And we had a really, really good crowd for you today, as always, Mackenzie, because this is such a vital subject, I know, for those working in mental health.
Yeah, thanks y'all for coming.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Again, Integrative Life Center, recording for this will be posted shortly to the blog. So go to integrativelifecenter.com and click on resources for therapists, and you can get the replay to Mackenzie today's webinar shortly, as well as the other one she's done in the past. Okay, everybody, have a happy 4th of July if you're based in the United States. See you
Thank
next time.
you. Bye-bye.